My name's Anthony Vega, but back in the 90s, everybody just called me Tony. I grew up in Miami, where the sun never stopped burning, where palm trees swayed over cracked sidewalks, and where every kid thought he was destined for something big. In Miami, people talked fast, lived fast, and dreamed even faster. It was the kind of city that made you believe you could grab success out of thin air, like it was hanging in the hot, humid air, waiting for you to take it. And me? I was no different. I wanted it all. Not just a good job, not just enough money to pay rent. I wanted to build something. I wanted to see my name on a building one day, to prove that a guy like me could rise above the noise. My first big idea came when I was barely 22, a chain of car washes. Miami was full of cars, from beat-up Hondas to flashy convertibles with music blasting out the windows. I thought, easy money. People always need clean cars. I borrowed money from a childhood friend, scraped together everything I had, and bought old equipment from a bankrupt shop. I even printed flyers, walked the neighborhoods in the heat, handing them out, telling myself this was it. This was how Tony Vega was going to start his empire. It lasted 1 month. The machines broke down constantly. Customers complained, and one by one, they stopped coming back. I spent nights in the car wash office, staring at unpaid bills, thinking maybe if I just worked harder tomorrow, things would turn around. But they didn't. By the end of summer, I was broke. My friends stopped returning my calls, and my first dream died right there, in a puddle of dirty water and grease. But I wasn't the type to quit. At least that's what I told myself. Failure hurt, but it also lit a fire inside me. I said, all right, that one didn't work. The next one will. So I tried again. This time it was importing cheap electronics from Latin America. Miami was the gateway, right? A city of connections. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Radios, watches, VCRs, all for a fraction of the US price. I imagined myself opening a store, maybe even a whole chain. I pictured warehouses with my name painted on the walls. The reality? Customs fees ate up my profits. Shipments arrived late, and half the products didn't even work. I once opened a box of brand new radios, only to find they were all dead on arrival. Customers demanded refunds I couldn't afford. Within months, I was back at zero, this time with debt stacked on top of me. People started laughing behind my back. My girlfriend at the time sat me down and said, Tony, maybe you're just not cut out for this business thing. That one hit me harder than losing the money. I felt like the whole city was against me, like Miami itself was telling me I wasn't good enough. But here's the thing. Every failure carved a scar, and every scar taught me something. The car wash taught me not to rely on junk equipment. The electronics fiasco taught me that connections don't mean anything if the product is trash. Each disaster left me broke, humiliated, but also a little wiser. And even though I felt crushed, deep down, I knew one thing. I wasn't done. I couldn't be. Quitting wasn't an option, because if I quit, then all that pain meant nothing. And I refused to let my failures define me. So I kept moving, searching, waiting for the next door to open. I didn't know it yet, but those scars from Miami would become my greatest weapons when I finally discovered the stock market. After my business disasters in Miami, I was tired of being laughed at, tired of feeling like the guy who always had another idea that never worked. But deep inside, I knew I wasn't done chasing. I just needed something different, something that didn't depend on broken machines or shady import deals. That's when I started hearing whispers about the stock market. Not from bankers or brokers. No, I didn't know people like that back then. I heard it from older guys in cafes, men who drank Cuban coffee all day and talked about tickers and dividends like it was some secret code. At first, I thought it was nonsense. How could numbers on a screen make you rich? But one evening, curiosity got the better of me. I bought a newspaper, the Miami Herald, and turned straight to the financial section. It was a blur of tiny numbers, arrows pointing up and down, company names I'd never heard of. I didn't understand any of it. But that page lit something in me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about selling products or running machines. I was thinking about learning a game, a system. I opened a small account with a local brokerage, barely scraping together enough for the minimum deposit. While everyone else was dreaming about quick money, I promised myself something different. No shortcuts this time. I'd already chased the easy roads and ended up face first in the dirt. If I was going to do this, I'd do it slow, careful, and smart. At first, my trades were boring. I bought shares of companies that had been around forever. Manufacturers, utilities, stuff nobody in Miami cared about. My friends thought I was crazy. One even laughed in my face. "Tony, why waste your time on those dinosaurs, man? Real money's in hot picks. Triple your cash overnight." But I didn't listen. I remembered the car wash. I remembered the boxes of dead radios. I knew chasing hot picks was just another trap. So I ignored them. Instead, I built a routine. Every morning, before work, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my coffee, reading the paper, circling companies, writing notes in the margins. At night, I'd compare my predictions with what actually happened. Most of the time, I was wrong. But sometimes, I was right. And those little victories lit me up inside me. The first time I sold a stock for a small profit, maybe $200, I felt like I'd cracked the code of the universe. $200 wasn't going to change my life, but it was the first time I'd tried something and not gone broke. For once, I was moving in the right direction. The best part? I was calm. I didn't panic when prices dropped, didn't brag when they went up. I treated every move like a lesson. My past failures had beaten the desperation out of me. I wasn't chasing anymore. I was building. But here's the truth. In Miami, nobody cared about a guy making boring profits. They wanted stories about jackpots. So, while my friends bragged about quick money, I quietly stacked small wins. They mocked me, called me Old Man Tony, even though I was barely in my 20s. I let them laugh. Deep down, I knew I was onto something. I didn't realize it at the time, but those long nights of circling numbers, those quiet mornings of studying charts, they were training me for something bigger. They were preparing me for New York, for Wall Street, for the place where the game wasn't just played, it was war. And I was ready to fight. By 1995, Miami started to feel too small for me. Don't get me wrong, it was my home. The beaches, the heat, the late-night cafecitos. But every time I read about Wall Street, I felt this pull, like gravity. The real game, the real money, the real test of everything I'd been practicing. It was all happening up there in New York. And if I wanted to see how far I could go, I had to be there. So I packed 2 suitcases, said goodbye to the palm trees, and landed in a city that felt like another planet. New York in the 90s wasn't the postcard version you see in movies. It was loud, dirty, chaotic, and alive. The streets shook with ambition. Every subway ride, every sidewalk corner, it felt like the city was testing me. Are you tough enough to survive here? I got my first job as an assistant to a broker named Richard Klein. Richard was the kind of guy you could hear before you saw him, always shouting into 2 phones at once, tie loose, sweat on his forehead. He thrived on chaos. To him, success was all about being louder, faster, and riskier than the next guy. To me, Richard was a nightmare, but also the best teacher I could have asked for. He called me Miami, like it was an insult. Every mistake I made, he pointed out in front of the whole office. "Vega, you move too slow. You'll never make it with that turtle brain of yours." The other guys laughed. I kept my head down. What Richard didn't realize was that I'd already learned what rushing got you: failure. I wasn't here to gamble or scream my way into deals. I was here to learn. So, while Richard was barking into phones, I was quietly copying contracts, reading annual reports after hours, studying how the market actually moved. New York had a way of crushing people. I saw young guys with big dreams flame out in months. They chased every hot stock, burned through their accounts, and left the office with nothing but excuses. I recognized that look in their eyes. It was the same look I had back in Miami, standing in the ruins of my failed businesses. But this time, I was different. This time, I had discipline. I worked nights at my tiny apartment in Queens, the kind where the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbors arguing through them. I'd sit under a dim lamp, reading company filings, highlighting pages until my eyes blurred. Sometimes I thought about giving up, moving back to the sunshine and starting over. But then I'd remember the humiliation of my past failures, the laughter of people who said I wasn't cut out for this. That memory kept me awake, pushing through fatigue. And slowly, it paid off. I started making trades on my own, small ones at first, nothing flashy. Unlike Richard and the others, I wasn't swinging for the fences. I played the long game. And little by little, my results began to speak louder than Richard's insults. It wasn't glamorous. Nobody was patting me on the back. But deep inside, I knew I was building something solid, something real. And for the first time, I started to believe I could actually belong here, not just as Richard's assistant, not just as Miami, but as someone who could stand on his own. What I didn't know then was that the city had another test waiting for me, one that would push me closer to losing everything than I ever imagined. By 1998, I had been on Wall Street for 3 years. 3 years of long nights, quiet victories, and staying calm while the world screamed around me. I had learned patience, discipline, and methodical thinking. I had seen the rookies blow their savings on flashy internet companies. I had seen the seasoned traders crash their portfolios chasing hype. And I had managed to survive. Small wins, no disasters, no headlines, just slow, steady progress. But human nature is tricky. The dot-com bubble was in full swing. Everywhere I looked, brokers were bragging about fortunes made overnight. Guys who were barely my age were suddenly driving Porsches, throwing parties, and laughing at anyone who stayed cautious. The temptation gnawed at me. I told myself, Tony, you're safe, you're disciplined, you don't need this. But that little voice, the one that had gotten me in trouble back in Miami, kept whispering, what if you're missing out? What if you stay boring forever and everyone else gets rich? One Friday night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring at my computer screen. A promising dot-com was surging, stocks multiplying day after day. My friends from the office were already bragging. You should jump in, Miami. This is your ticket. And for the first time, I felt it. Greed, pure and simple. Against every lesson I had learned, against every failure that had shaped me, I gave in. I emptied nearly everything I had left into that one stock. I told myself it would be different. I rationalized. I've studied the market. I'm smarter now. I'll get out before it crashes. For a few glorious weeks, it worked. My account ballooned. I doubled, then tripled my money. I walked around the office like a king, chest puffed out, smug. Richard even raised an eyebrow, muttering, Miami finally learns how to gamble. I felt invincible. I had finally broken the cage of caution, and it felt exhilarating. Then it all fell apart. The bubble burst. The stock plummeted. Overnight, everything I invested vanished. I stared at the screen, frozen, stomach in knots. Panic, despair, and shame collided inside me. I had felt this before. Miami, the car wash, the electronics. But this time, it hurt even more. I had been careful. I had been smart. And yet, I had still fallen. For days, I barely slept. I avoided Richard in the office. I didn't answer calls. I walked the streets of Manhattan at night, thinking about quitting, thinking about going home, thinking about starting over again from nothing. But amidst the chaos, a quiet thought emerged, one I hadn't had since Miami. You've been through worse. You survived then. You can survive now. That night, staring at the city lights through my apartment window, I realized something important. Temptation is always there. Pride, greed, and the desire for quick wins, they don't vanish just because you're older, smarter, or stronger.
What matters is how you respond. And I made a choice. I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't let one mistake define me. I would rebuild, methodically, patiently, and smarter than ever. This was my crossroads. One path led to despair, the other to something I had been chasing my whole life. After the crash, I felt like I had been stripped bare. My account, my confidence, even my pride, it was all gone. For a moment, I sat in my tiny Manhattan apartment, surrounded by stacks of unpaid bills, feeling that same crushing hopelessness I had felt back in Miami when the car wash failed. I thought about quitting, walking away, going home, starting over in the sun and sand. But something inside me wouldn't let me. Something stubborn, something relentless, whispered, "Not this time. You've come too far to quit now." So I began again, but differently this time. No shortcuts, no flashy bets, no chasing what everyone else was hyping. I sold the few remaining stocks I had and threw myself into the work I should have been doing all along. Research, analysis, understanding the market from the ground up. Every company, every report, every trend became a lesson. I wrote notes, built spreadsheets, stayed late at the office, studied how successful traders thought, and how the failures I'd witnessed could be avoided. I ignored the laughter, the whispers, the skepticism. Richard and the other brokers didn't stop mocking me when they saw I was cautious again. "Miami, you'll never make it at this pace," they said. But I knew something they didn't. I had the patience and the scars to endure what they couldn't. Every trade I made was deliberate. I calculated risk with care, studied patterns others ignored, and kept my emotions locked down. I remembered the car wash, the radios, the dot-com crash. Those failures weren't weights, they were armor. They kept me grounded when panic spread like wildfire around me. Months turned into years. The market shifted, booms and busts came and went, and slowly my account began to grow. Not overnight, not in headlines, but steadily. Every small profit was a victory, every mistake a lesson. The more methodical I became, the more confidence I gained. Not arrogance, but quiet certainty. And then came the moment I realized I had truly changed. I wasn't chasing the next big score. I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. I was building something sustainable, something real, something I could trust. I could withstand shocks, stay calm, and make decisions that mattered. I wasn't rich yet, not in the sense of flashy cars or mansions, but I was strong. I was disciplined. And for the first time, I knew that even if the market crashed tomorrow, I could survive, because I had already survived everything else life had thrown at me. That slow, painful climb back wasn't glamorous. It wasn't celebrated, but it was mine. Every scar, every failure, every lonely night studying reports, it all led to this, a foundation I could finally trust. And for the first time, I truly felt that maybe, just maybe, Wall Street wasn't going to break me after all. Looking back, my story isn't about flashy wins or instant success. It's about falling over and over and refusing to stay down. From failed car washes in Miami to blown-up dot-com stocks in New York, life humiliated me repeatedly. But every mistake taught me patience, discipline, and the value of methodical work.